I'm Melanie, and I am the Adult Services Manager at MacArthur Library. And we also have in the background Joe, who is our Technology Coordinator at MacArthur Library. And he'll be making sure that everything is being recorded in the background. So if you don't want to be recorded, make sure you just close off your camera. He'll be editing it after as well, so that and it'll be available on YouTube for those people who signed up and didn't get a chance to come. But it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Susan Wehry, who is Chief of Geriatrics at the University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine and the Director of Aging Me, Maine's Geriatric Workforce Enhancement Program, GWEP. But I feel like we've gotten to be friends during this last couple of months. It's been really fun. So we're really excited to be partnering with UNE on a project that we're going to be announcing very shortly, but it's part of our celebration of Older Americans Month. So I'm just going to turn things over to Susan, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Muted, I know. There, I found it first. Yeah, it's totally my pleasure to be here. And for those of you who came on a little early, you can see that I am very pleased to be considered Melanie's friend and a friend of MacArthur Public Library. We have had a little bit of a love fest going on for the better part of this year. So I do want to give a shout out to the library. I live here in Biddeford, and so it's my public library, as well as being the town of our university. And it really is such a gift to be here. I am going to jump right into my program, which, as Melanie may or may not have mentioned, is in association with Older Americans Month, which is the month of May. And their logo for this year is Age My Way, which I think is a really apt sentiment, if you will, for Older Americans Month, because one of the things that we know about we older Americans, or us older Americans, is that we are a very mixed lot. And I think that one of the things that makes talking about aging so interesting is that this is an age in which we are the most heterogeneous, the most mixed, the most variable, the most different. So we acknowledge that, we celebrate it, and we are grateful for it. This project, as Melanie did mention, is supported by the Health Resource and Service Administration, or HRSA, and the grant that she referenced and that I'll just say a word about is a 5-year grant that we are in the 3rd year of. This is the 1st year of our partnering with the MacArthur Library, but we hope it's not the last. This grant really has 3 primary aims, and just say a word about it before talking about brain health. And I hope after this, everybody will be able to ask their doctor whether they know about the 4 M's, because the 4 M's is a framework for talking about older adult health that would result in an age-friendlier health system. So we want to get an age-friendly health system. That's really our ultimate goal. And we think that's going to take 3 things in order to make it age-friendly. We think, 1, older adults ourselves will have to feel and to act in a more empowered way. What does that mean? Speak up for yourself. Talk to your doctor about what matters most to you. That's one of the M's, and I think kind of the key M. Another of the M's, which is a way of summing up older adult care, is to make an emphasis on, or to have an emphasis on, mobility, which is about preventing falls, which is about remaining physically active, but is also about getting around. Not everybody is mobile under their own 2 feet, the steam of their own 2 feet, and mobility for some may mean assistive devices. Mobility for others may mean transportation needs being met. So when you see these 4 M's and you think about your own lives, think about these areas in which you might have concern or interest in making stronger. So what matters most? Getting around, medications, and the topic for today, mind or mentation. And brain health is what we're going to talk about. We get to age friendly, as I said, in three ways. One is getting older adults to speak up. Secondly, to make sure that people who are in health profession training programs, who are part of who are going to be part of the workforce, are what we call age capable. We want them to know about how being older is different than being younger, meaning quite simply that our bodies and our brains and our interests are different at 80 than they are at 20. That's a pretty big range of aging. But the idea is over the lifespan from birth to death, however long that lifespan is, we change. And we want our healthcare team to know about those differences. We want them to know about the difference between reproduction and menopause. And we want them to know about the difference between normal cognitive changes of aging and diseases that affect older adults, like Alzheimer's disease. We want people to know about that, and by that be more age capable. And then finally, we want to transform primary care practice so that more primary care doctors and nurse practitioners are actually asking about the 4Ms, are actually asking you about what matters most, are actually having Medicare annual wellness visits so that we don't just check in when we're sick, but that at least once a year we check in even when we're well. And why? Because we want to learn about those ways in which we can promote our own health. That's what our grant is all about. Now, as I said about the mobility, and I didn't really talk about medication, but mentation or mind, when we engage with the healthcare system, it's really across a spectrum of wellness to illness. And when we talk about wellness, we also talk about age-associated changes in our brains. And these are normal changes in cognition. These are things like the fact that knowledge and judgment get better over time. We have more lived experience. We know about more things in the world. We know about how to solve problems. And our judgment actually improves. On the other hand, how fast we do things, our so-called processing speed, and our memory decline. And that decline in memory is measurable at around age 35. For some reason, people think about memory decline as happening, I don't know, when you get gray hair or when you get your first pair of bifocals or when you get wrinkles. We think of memory decline as this old age phenomenon, but actually memory decline decreases over the lifespan, slowly, not that perceptibly, but measurably. And interestingly, although some decline in memory is inevitable, and it starts very young, memory decline that results in dysfunction is actually uncommon unless you have a disease like Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, or one of the other dementing illnesses. In other words, expect to see some changes. Not all changes lead to illness, and all changes can be adapted to. Now, there is this middle category called mild cognitive impairment, which is a little bit more substantial than just the normal age-associated changes, but not enough to interfere with doing our usual function, doing our activities of daily living, taking care of ourselves, living independently, making judgments, etc. We don't yet know. We think that mild cognitive impairment might be an early warning sign of developing dementia due to, say, Alzheimer's disease, but not all mild cognitive impairment does head in that direction. Perhaps if we lived long enough, well, in past 100, and we had mild cognitive impairment at, say, 85 or 90, we might see it. We really don't know. What I'm talking about today, though, is going to be wellness. I want to talk about that end of the spectrum of health, from wellness to illness, that we would call the wellness part, and how to keep our brains functioning well, how to keep our brains healthy. Now, Here's what's going to be really interesting, and I want those of you who are older adults to pay close attention to this. It turns out that one of the biggest interferences with healthy brain aging is our belief that we can't do it. Our belief that we can't learn new things is a big barrier to taking a risk to try to learn new things. We also know that how we feel about getting older, whether we have a positive attitude towards it or a not so positive attitude, actually will take years from our life. To put it in the positive way, older individuals with more positive perceptions of getting older and what it means to get older will live on average 7.5 years longer. That's the one I'm shooting for, is the kind of attitude that says, I embrace being older. I embrace getting older, and kind of hedging my bets, if I do, then I can expect a longer life. And in that longer life, with a positive attitude, I can expect also more positive living. Now, I have to tell you a funny story. I have been talking about healthy aging and brain health and how I like getting old almost all my life, all right? So I was talking about this when I was 30 and when I was 40 and when I was 50 and when I was 60, and now that I'm 70, I'm still talking about it. And in my younger years, that is to say in my 60s and my 50s, it was not uncommon for people in their 70s and 80s to say to me, oh yeah, you talk about positive aging. Wait till you get here. Wait till you're my age. Then come back and talk to me. So I've had to go back and talk to them every 10 years and say, well, still have a positive attitude. Oh yeah, but just wait till you have a health problem. Because I've been blessed, pretty lucky, pretty healthy, pretty able to get around. Then 5 years ago, at 65, newly on Medicare, I'm happy to say, I had a nasty fall and I broke my shoulder. And the sad thing about this is that I was in training for a big mountain climb. And so I had some surgery, had to repair the fracture. And if any of you have ever had shoulder surgery, you know that for a period of time you wear this big old cast. Your arm stays out from your body like this. It's really uncomfortable. You wear it for a long time. And undaunted, I had my surgery, I had my cast, I was still trying to train. So I was walking around my neighborhood and I was coming up the hill. This is when I still lived in Vermont. I was coming up the hill and an older woman, older than I, meaning, walking her dogs, not unlike this picture, though that's not she, points to my shoulder and says, oh, don't you just hate getting old? And I said, I don't know about getting old, but I sure hate busting up my shoulder. And she went on then to say, oh, my shoulder, my knees, and continued to emphasize all of the downsides of these aging bodies that we each had. So I listened and, didn't really agree. I really didn't like having a broken shoulder, but I didn't connect it to being older. And the next day, very next day, while I'm pondering these things, I'm walking on the other street and I pass a young man who's on his skateboard. And he points to my shoulder and says, skateboard? And I said, you have just given me like a great couple of slide ideas, because if I've never seen a better capture of that idea about perception, my broken shoulder had not changed. One person saw it as, oh, getting old. Another person saw it as, that's what happens when you skateboard, okay? And it is what happens when you have an active life. You might have more injuries. Now, being older might mean you break more bones. And it might mean you have to take care in a different way. I understand all of that. But my point here, I think it's kind of obvious what my point is that We have control over our attitudes about this whole aging process, and that attitude, if you wish to experience good brain health, has to be applied to your brain as well. Now, I mentioned this before, but I just want to say it again by way of a level playing field for our knowledge. There is tremendous variation in the way we age. And I'm sure everybody has an Uncle Joe, because it seems like people do, who smoked and drank his whole life and lived to be 98, having a cigar and some whiskey. And I know other people have had older family members who have died young, despite never smoking, drinking, doing any of the other things we're not supposed to do. There's a lot of variation. But what accounts for a lot of how we age is how we approach it and what lifestyle choices that we make. The other thing I want to tell you is that, in case you haven't heard, is that our brains continue to build new connections well into old age. You know, when I was in medical school, which was in the 1970s, we were taught, take care of your brain, it's the only one you'll get. When brain cells die, you never get new ones. But what we've learned in the last 2 decades is that that's not actually true. We do continue to make new nerve cells, new brain cells, and more importantly, we continue to make new connections with the old ones that we have. So when the brain is healthy, and you lose some brain cells, which we will with aging, just like you lose muscle cells, when that's happening, the brain compensates. We call that neuronal plasticity, if you like words and you like concepts. Neuronal plasticity. It continues to change, to be modified. And we can drive that process for healthier brains. We can drive that process of neuronal, meaning nerve cell, plasticity, meaning malleability or reshaping. We can drive that with lifestyle and with all the other things I'm going to talk to you about in this presentation today. So if you're still hanging on to your old high school biology or old medical school or old nursing school or any other place where you learned that your brains just drop off, we know better than that now. And we know that how we live impacts all of this. So let's talk about what really matters when it comes to brain health. The best evidence for a healthy brain turns out to be the same thing that's good for your heart, same thing that's good for your bones, same thing that's good for everything, and that's physical exercise. Everybody knows this. So the bigger challenge, I think, is how to get us to do it, how to get a regular exercise program or regular set of physical activities. Because this isn't new knowledge to you. But I wonder how many of us, and if anybody wants to share, they can put it in the chat box, actually do the recommended amount of physical activity. The recommended amount of physical activity is 30 minutes of aerobics a day. That's what's good for your brain. It's also what's good for your heart. If you add strength training, and weight-based training to that, it's also good for your bones. Weights are required to be good for your muscles. And some people, but myself included, do have a daily activity of some part of that. So walking is the one that I always promote because it's easiest, it's free, and in Maine it's beautiful. So being able to walk 30 minutes a day takes care of everything except your muscles and bones, and for that you need some strength training and some weights. But walking is an excellent exercise. To get the full benefit for your brain, you need to get your heart rate up a little bit. That's why it's aerobic. But it doesn't need to all be 30 minutes at once. So depending on your lifestyle, depending on your heart, depending on all of your conditions, You could take 3 10-minute walks a day. You could take 2 15-minute walks and meet your sort of daily requirement of physical activity. Now, what's pictured here, of course, is a Tai Chi class, and there's some evidence that suggests that choosing an exercise activity or exercise plan that you do with others makes it more likely that you will keep it up, and that's probably true. So if you happen to be part of a Medicare Advantage plan, you might do this from your Silver Sneakers card, to which you can get either online physical activity, or you can go to one of the local gyms. I think that Saco has 2 different locations that honor the Silver Sneakers card. And since you're here in this webinar, that tells me that you're online. So you know how to search the web. So you have access to a computer or a pad or iPad or something that you're joining me here today. So if you have a Silver Sneakers card, Google Silver Sneakers and see if there are any programs or classes that appeal to you. The Southern Maine Area Agency on Aging, and I think probably Seniors in Motion in Saco, I think is the name of that one, have exercise classes as well, but I don't know how often they meet. In other words, we have resources here in the Saco, Biddeford, Old Orchard Beach area, in fact, York County, and throughout most of Maine, because we have a pretty robust Area Agency on Aging system that's actually funded by the Older Americans Act, which is the same act that brings us Older Americans Month. So, physical activity, 30 minutes a day, is critical for your brain. I can't say it often enough. Aerobic exercise is the most important aspect of that for your heart and brain. If you have any heart problems, you may want to check with your doctor or nurse practitioner before initiating an exercise program. Doing it with others, or having what they like to call now an accountability partner, is another strategy, another way of getting yourself to get out and do the exercises every day. Now that the weather's nice here, getting out and taking a walk should be a little bit easier. It's the getting out and doing it that is just, I can't say enough about how important it is to build this into your daily routine. The area agencies on aging also offer exercise classes online. And I got to tell you, a really popular one that our grant funded this year was something called Bingo Size, which is this sort of online bingo game mixed with exercise. Maybe they do some armchair yoga. I'm not actually sure. I haven't taken it yet, but it is a big hit. And used to be just available up in Aroostook County, but now, thanks to COVID and virtual webinars, you can tune into a bingo size class from anywhere in the state. And I think there are several places offering it. So, quiz question number 1, what is the most important thing for brain health? Physical activity. And if you want to improve other parts of your body, choose your activities wisely. Your brain will be grateful for all of it. But if you have a little trouble with your balance, Tai Chi might be the way to go. The other thing that I can't say enough about is the importance of social connection. Friends really matter. And here I am with a group of mine. One of us has already passed away from Alzheimer's disease. The rest of us are living, but 3 of us have had cancer. All of us, I think, in this particular photo are married. And all of us value our friends and family connections very deeply. Why? Because I told them it would help them have healthy brains. No, we have friends that matter deeply because we're older and we've known one another for a really, really long time. And you can't make new old friends, but you can certainly make deep, good new friends if you're starting to lose your friends as I am. Friends really matter, social connection. They also keep us mentally alert, intellectually stimulated, and importantly, let us know that we matter. And it matters that we matter. It's one of the dimensions of maintaining hope and self-esteem and self-efficacy and a sense of competence. In other words, all of those things that allow us to feel good about ourselves as we also feel good about getting older. If you're losing a lot of friends, which does happen as we get older, then it's important that you grieve that adequately, that you acknowledge it, that you discover, I guess I would say, the rituals or the ways that you will keep people alive in mind, as well as looking for opportunities for new connections. The natural world also matters a great deal for brain health. For those of you who like to read, I forgot to check with Melanie to see if we have this at MacArthur, but there was an article in the Smithsonian, I think in 2016, maybe 2017, called Your Brain on Nature. And it was one of the most interesting sort of lay press articles that I've read. There was also a great article in Nature, same topic, on your brain in the natural world. And it turns out that there is something about walking among the trees, walking along the ocean, looking out at a vast expanse that actually creates greater, what we call psychological space, greater like cognitive space. That's point number one, that it actually, looking at a horizon in the natural world, expands your ability to think, if that makes sense. The other thing about being in the natural world has to do with the changes that it causes in our brain chemistry. These days, given an exceptionally divisive political culture, given the war in the Ukraine, given yet another mass shooting that that is racially motivated, given our 2 years of COVID, I don't need to tell anyone how stressful this has been, what a toll it has taken on our brains, and how many people, even if they've never had COVID, feel as though they're in something of a brain fog, that their brains just aren't working as well. And part of the reason for that is that when we are faced with the kind of stress that we have been faced with for these last 2 years in all those ways that I've mentioned, a part of our brain that's called the fear center, or the amygdala, if you like brain part names, the amygdala, has been in overdrive. It's ramped up, and it pours out chemicals that trigger the whole stress hormone response. You've heard about cortisol as a stress hormone. Well, when the amygdala is turned on all the time, it just causes cortisol to be released all the time. When we spend time in the natural world, and how lucky are we to be here, when we spend time in the natural world, it actually tames that, it mitigates it, it tunes it down. And it turns out that being in the natural world is good for our stress response as well as for expanding our mental horizon in a certain way. So one of the ways you can combine these first three approaches to brain health is to get a friend to go for a walk along the beach. And then you've hit nature, friends, and physical activity. And make it a ritual, make it a part of your day, make it a time of day where you can, always plan to do it. I'm going to pause there and ask if anybody does this now, but I think I'll wait at the end and ask you what you're doing now for your brain health. I'll hold my enthusiasm for the end for the Q&A. So, nature matters, physical activity matters, friends matter, nutrition matters. One of the joint projects that we're planning with the MacArthur as we move into the spring and summer is to really focus on brain health and good nutrition for aging, but particularly talking about healthy nutrition for the brain. And again, I think that you probably know most of this. I think people know about eating their vegetables and eating their antioxidants and avoiding red meat and eating fish. I don't think this is new news. One of the big challenges that we've talked a lot about, both with our friends at the MacArthur as well as at the university, is the rising price of food and how we can address food insecurity, which is a growing problem in Maine. At the same time, we're encouraging people to eat healthier diets. And that's one of the things MacArthur has agreed to partner with us on is, eating well on a budget, eating for one on a budget. Like, how do we take these principles that we all know about our helpings of fruits and vegetables and turn it into reality? What what actually is good to go in a smoothie that's going to be good for your brain? Those kinds of tips we're putting together, be available at the MacArthur Library, to really zero in on nutrition with the help of some colleagues at the nutrition department here at UNE as well. So this is something that I encourage you to read about, think about, modify your diet around. But I also want to say that I know it is not easy. I just want to stress that it's really, really important. Having a sense of purpose and meaning is critical for healthy aging, to be sure. And for many people, I think this is in some ways the primary motivator in most of life. This was certainly true for the writer Viktor Frankl, who said that man's search for meaning is the primary motivator throughout the life cycle. He also called it the will to meaning. And as I mentioned in Book Talk last week, I first became familiar with Viktor Frankl, whom, as you know, is a Holocaust survivor, who went on to found a particular kind of therapy called logotherapy. And it was really about this search for meaning, this quest for meaning, and about how the only thing we can control is our attitude. The people can take everything else from us except our will to meaning and our will to hold things, to have the attitude towards them that we willed. Easier said than done, I think, but a critical part of maintaining this highest functioning part of our brain and supporting, I think, the quest for meaning in late life as well as across the lifespan. So it's not so much that we have to remain engaged in work or engaged in rearing children or engaged in any of our volunteer activities. All of those help us to find a sense of purpose, but what meaning we make of that purpose, what meaning we make of our lives, is in some ways a largely mental activity, and one that requires that we actually make time for reflection. In this culture, we're a very action-driven culture. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, I think. But it can get a little one-sided. It can get a little overdeveloped in one area. I think sometimes to the exclusion of slower aspects of living, contemplative practices, reflective practices, where we aren't just engaged in purposeful activity, though that is important, but that we're making meaning of all of it, that we're thinking about it, we're reflecting on it, that we examine the wisdom traditions, that we think about our place in the world, whatever that lifespan is. That's what I'm talking about here in terms of continuing to exercise our mental power. And to be able to do that, we really do want to have healthy brains. Talking about meaningfulness, if you will, or what the meaning of our lives is also important. So it's not just an internal activity. Some people like to keep a journal. Some people like to express themselves in terms of their finding their meaning through their art. There's not like one way's not better than another. Some people might do it through music, playing it or making it or writing it. The real take home here is don't neglect the contemplative, reflective practices that your brain is capable, alongside problem solving and all the other great things that the brain happens to do and be capable of. One of the things that I really encourage in terms of brain health from the standpoint of emotionally healthy brains is taking time to understand and tell our stories, particularly of these past 2 years, particularly of all of the challenges that we have faced, and for the most part, faced pretty well. And not that they're over, but we've entered a new phase, I think, with the pandemic. And it's important that we tell first-person stories, that we tell our stories, because stories are at the core of our identity. They're a way that we make sense of our own lives. It's a way that we make sense of our lives and pass that on to others. And we know for sure that stories have the power to heal and to empower us. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention, and I thought I had a slide for it, but I guess I forgot it, is the notion of intellectual stimulation and to what kinds of intellectual stimulation might work better than others. To put this in kind of straightforward language, a lot of people ask me, should I be doing Sudoku? A lot of people ask, should I be doing crossword puzzles as a way of trying to get brain health? And the answer to that is this. If you like doing Sudoku puzzles, you should definitely be doing them. If you like doing crossword puzzles, you should definitely be doing them. You shouldn't be doing them if you don't like doing them. In other words, there is zero evidence that working through book after book of Sudoku puzzles does anything for your brain, unless you happen to enjoy it, because there's a lot of evidence that being happy, having joy, being playful, using humor is really good for our brains. So intellectual stimulation, I guess what I'm saying is, runs the gamut from reading, which tends to be a solitary individual activity until you join a book club. And then it becomes both a solitary activity, a good mental stimulation, and then a good social connection. And the other thing beyond social connection about book clubs is that other people might have an idea different than yours, creating the opportunity for dialogue, disagreements in a civil way, fun back and forth about different ideas that get us out of our echo chambers, only talking with people that agree with us. It's fun to read books together so that you can discuss ideas about which you agree and about which you disagree, which gives me an opportunity to plug our book club this month at the MacArthur. We're reading Still Life, which, as some of you may know, is a first-person account of a psychologist, a neuropsychologist's personal journey, personal experience with Alzheimer's disease. What's great about her ability to, or what's great about her having written this book is because it's in her area of interest and because she's psychologically minded, she's able to describe what's going on within her brain, what's going on in her thinking as she observes these changes and these losses, really, of her mental faculties and how she deals with that. So plug for Still Alice and plug for the book club. And when maybe Melanie, if Melanie comes back on, which I imagine she will, then we can ask her for the date and time of that particular book club. Oh, there she is. She's holding up the copies.
I had it on my list too.
Oh, good.
To plug it. Yeah, we have books in large print and regular, and the book club date is the 25th And if you still, we also have these swag bags. Sorry, I've got my, I guess I could change my, yeah, I have my video camera set, but we have these cool swag bags of all the neat things that you gave us to give away. And it's got all the programming information on them. So you can
Excellent.
stop and pick up a book and join us for the book talk, which is
Okay.
next week. It's coming up really quickly.
Yeah, I was thinking that it must be coming up pretty soon. Yeah, excellent. Excellent. So we will have that next week. So, here's your takeaway for positive aging, and then we're going to have a conversation. I hope that you have some questions, and I hope you have some tips about the things that you're already doing to keep your brain healthy. Aside from coming to talks like this, which is another great way to stay engaged. So here's the bottom line from my perspective about growing older. It's going to happen if we're lucky. It's inevitable, okay? If you're lucky. It's also necessary, I think, to grow older if we want to really maximize our full human potential. Imagine if your life had ended at 20 or at 30 or at 40 or at 50 or at 60 or at 70. Imagine what's left to be done. And imagine all that you've learned so far. And imagine how much more there is to learn. It's really, I'm kind of with Frankel on this. It's all about finding the meaning, the purpose, and there's all about maximizing the potential. So the more years you get, the more you get opportunities to learn. And so if you want to learn the most, you got to live the most. So, or you got to live as long as you can with as healthy a brain as you can. Being healthy, I think, I would like you to take away, and having a healthy brain is really about a combination of attitude, lifestyle factors, the ones that I mentioned, like physical activity and our diet and so forth, and having friends. But being healthy is not just about not having any decline. It's not about ignoring that there are things that are harder, things that you can't do. It's really about, and it's definitely not about staying young. One of the things that really bugs me about a lot of the successful aging literature is that, and a lot of successful old people, is that they define their success in terms of their youth. And they'll say things like, oh, I refuse to get old. I'm going to stay young at heart. I am forever young, as if that's a good thing. I'm trying to say it is a good thing in its own right, being young, and being old is a good thing in its own right. And so I think that when people say the only way I know how to grow old well is to stay young, or the only way I know how to grow old is to refuse to do it, or to say age is just a number. I don't know about you, but at least for me, 70 is more than just a number. It is different than being 25. It's just different. It's not better, it's not worse. It's different. And so it's interesting. So my goal is not to try to still feel 50 or still feel 25 or be some other age, but to say, I wonder what 70 is going to be like, because it's going to be different for all of us. But growing old is not, in my opinion, about staying young, but it is about feeling vital. And vitality requires having a healthy supply of memories and a healthy supply of meaning to carry us across the lifespan. That's what I think people mean when they say, I'm just going to stay young, because we look to youth as being the most vital. That's true. Youth has a lot of vitality, but so does old age. And we don't have to call it young to call it vital. All of this, though, requires a good attitude, or a positive attitude. I won't say it's good, but a positive attitude, and absolutely requires our active participation. You won't get there passively. Here's what I like to think about at the close of every talk I give on brain health or healthy aging. I like to think, how old am I now and how old am I going to be in 25 years? because a lot of people who talk about aging think about old as whatever age they are plus 20 years. So they say, well, I'm 70, I'm not old. Who's old? Old 90-year-olds. So I'm old now. I hope to get older. And in 25 years, I'll be 95. That's a sobering thought, but it's an interesting thought. And I hope that I will remain positively being with aging. So let's now talk. Let's change this to a Q&A and tell me what you think of all this. First, take down my information if you want to stay in touch with us through the grant, and or if you want to have a conversation by email, I'll leave that up for a moment. And if you are on Twitter, I promise you, you will not get any doom scrolling from my Twitter account. You will also not see many posts, and you will see that I don't have many followers. But if we want to start our own private Being with Aging club on Twitter, that's how we could do it. So, what do you think?
I have a question.
Yeah, Melanie.
So I'm an avid hiker, and you were talking about going up a mountain when you broke your shoulder. Where were you going?
I was going, this is a funny story. I was going to the Himalayas and in Nepal. I was actually on a medical service mission, and I did end up going. But here's why it was so important to me to go. Roshi Joan Halifax, who is a Buddhist monk, has been leading medical pilgrimages to Nepal for 30 years. She herself is turning 80 this year. And I learned about this when I was taking a course in contemplative care at the end of life. So Roshi Joan says that she's going to have this trek, which she does every year, to Nepal. And I think, oh my gosh, I would love to do that. I'd never been a mountaineer, I'd never done any hiking, but I thought I'd love that. I'd done a lot of medical service missions. It is one of my sources of meaning and pleasure in life. And so I said to Joan, oh, I'd love to go with you. And she said, oh, you can't go, you're too old. And I thought, oh, talk about fighting words. So I said, well, Joan, that's very interesting. I think you got me beat by about a decade. She said, yeah, but I've been doing this for 20 years and, I don't know, like, how's your health? And so we have this whole exchange. So I said, look, tell you what, I'm going to talk to the medical director of this and I'm going to find out what do I have to be able to do. And, maybe I am too old, but I think what you really mean is, well, maybe I'm not strong enough or maybe I can't, whatever. What's my stamina? So she says, okay. So I find out, what I have to lift from my backpack, how many miles we're going to be hiking every day. I'd never been at altitude. And it was while I was training, actually, for that I fell. So now I go back to it, and my partner was ready to kill me. So I go back to the surgeon, I go back to the medical director, and I said, look, I've got 6 more weeks. The surgeon says I'll be safe to go. If I can still meet all the stamina requirements, may I still go with you? And they said yes, and I went. And so I have hiked in Nepal in the foothills of the Himalayas. I'm not an Everest climber, but did my medical service in mission in Dolpo region, if you know that part of the world.
That is so cool.
It was very cool. It also taught me a lot about how to be dependent, because there was a period of time that I couldn't tie my own shoes because of this thing and the pain. I mean, I was a mess. And, it's so interesting because you talk a lot about things in your life. I do as a geriatric psychiatrist. I've been talking about these things for years and particularly talking about our love affair with independence, which is like a total delusion. I don't make my clothes. I don't grow my own food. We are so interdependent. We rely on each other all the time, and yet we like to think of ourselves as very independent, and so do I. But what I've come to appreciate as an adult is how interdependent we are. And boy, did I get a lesson in that while I was recovering. And it was such a good lesson. So yeah. Anyway, thanks for asking. It's a fun memory to recall. What else?
I don't have this is Mona. I don't have a question, but I have to, and it may come to a question, but I have three things that I want to note before I forget them. And one is, and I do that. One of them is regarding the Silver Sneakers exercise program. I just want to mention that the Saco Sports and Fitness here in Saco, I live in Biddeford, but in Saco, is absolutely wonderful. With age-related exercise. They have Silver Sneakers classes specifically, and I have always felt very welcome there, never felt intimidated or any of that. And I've worked with a couple of trainers there, and they're absolutely wonderful. Just want to say that.
Oh,
If
wait,
people
Mona,
are,
I'm
if
actually
people
looking
are a
for,
little intimidated, but don't be, because they're fabulous.
I'm actually looking for a personal trainer, and I don't know if we want this on the recording or not, so I don't know,
Well,
Joe.
just talk to them, and they have
But,
great people. They
Joe
have
can
wonderful
take it out.
people.
If you
No,
could put
that's
that in
okay.
the chat box for me, Mona,
I will. Yes.
the
Oh, I
name
can
of
email
somebody,
you.
or
I
email
have your
me.
email. I can email you with that information. Yeah,
Yeah.
I worked with Rose. Her name was Rose, and
Okay.
she was absolutely wonderful. I don't know how much she does all personal training, but she did a lot of, and I can go to her and ask her questions and things like that. So absolutely wonderful, and was very receptive to if I said, okay, I can do this, but I can't do that, she would find another way for me, which was wonderful. The other thing I want to mention regarding nutrition is I don't know if how many people are aware of the Senior Farm Share program here in Maine. It's offered through the state of Maine, and if you qualify financially, it provides $50 worth of free vegetables from a farm stand or farmer's market or something like that. So definitely keep that in mind. And the other, since you mentioned Buddhism, just an aside, I have been to the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies in Barry, Massachusetts, and one of the things they do offer is David Chernikoff does work there, is a wonderful session weekend on aging and getting older and that kind of thing. So those three things that I wanted to mention before I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget them. Lots of good stuff out there for everyone, I think.
There really is, Mona, and thank you for that. I'm going to get in contact with David. If you would tell me the spelling of his last name.
Oh, I can send you that as well.
Okay,
and I'll send you, and I think he's doing a workshop again this year. He's actually from Boulder, but he does workshops at the Barry Center. And I just loved him. I just thought, what an amazing man. And I met some wonderful people there. I was there for, I think, 4 days, and they do group work and lectures, and it's just a wonderful experience. I really, truly, highly recommend it. If you have that penchant or bent, spiritual bent. I'm not a Buddhist, and I don't think you have to be. It's just a really wonderful experience.
Yeah. My partner is, I'm not, but I don't think you have to have that bent. I think Buddhism offers so much, but
it does.
Particularly interested in this because I had spoken with the folks at Breadloaf Mountain Zen Center, which is
I don't know them.
That's outside of Rutland. And because I think that a weekend retreat or workshop would be fantastic. I'd love to do one in Maine. I was thinking about the Marie Joseph Center, but I didn't have any models to go on. There's I went to this really cool thing called Being with Dying. That's where I met Joan Halifax on contemplative care at the end of life, and I've always thought it would be so great to have a Being with Aging workshop.
Yeah,
but I wasn't quite sure. I'm basically a doctor and I'm a teacher and I'm at the university and I'm not exactly a conference planner. So
sure.
I didn't know how to do it, but I bet this David and you could help.
Oh,
me.
he could work with you, I'm sure. He was in the process of writing a book. I don't know if it ever got done, but he will, I'm sure, eventually publish something. Yeah, he's terrific. I'll send you all that information.
Thank you so much,
Okay,
Mona.
great.
Anne, did I see your box light up before?
Pardon?
I was asking Anne. I thought I saw her box light up, like she wanted to also say something.
No, I was thinking that maybe you could send the information to all of us. And that way we would all have it.
I can do that. Absolutely.
Mona, if you want to send it out to us, we can send it to because we'll have all the email addresses. So feel free to
Great.
send it to me and or
I'll do that,
Joe,
Melanie.
either one of
You
us, and
bet.
we'll make sure that the information gets there.
That's what I'll do. Thanks, Melanie.
Perfect.
So I'm fortunate to be continuing to get older. And I'm wondering if I'm kind of a science and data type person, and I like to measure things so I can see how I'm doing and how they're getting, if things getting better or things getting worse. And I'm wondering with cognition, is there a way, like, are there cognition tests that you can take so that you can see how you're doing over time?
Great question, Joe, and the answer is yes. I actually was just last week at the American Geriatric Society meeting and learned about several new digital versions of cognitive testing. Cognistat is one that was interesting to me. I haven't used these products, so I can't personally vouch for them, but the data looked pretty good in terms of the validity of measurements over time. We know that here's one of the things about measuring cognition. Most of the cognitive tests that are designed, like you've heard of the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test, the so-called MoCA, right? Most of them are designed actually to detect deficits as opposed to strengthening over time. So there are 3 digital platforms that I personally play with because I like their games. And one of them is Lumosity, one of them is called NeuroNation out of Germany, and the other one is called Elevate Labs. And I think that's a stateside one. However, none of them have withstood close scrutiny in terms of really measuring anything meaningful. What they seem to measure is the practice effect. So I can tell you, for example, that the Lumosity was the first one that I discovered, and you can play games in whatever area you think you want to strengthen or is already your strength and you want to feel smart. So, if you're a big word heavy person, you can play all the word games, say, wow, 97th percentile. Or if you want to test your speed, you can do a little highway road game and go, ooh, 80th percentile. You got to work on your speed processing. All of these games you will improve on, okay? It probably doesn't mean anything. But at least you can do visuospatial orientation, you can do word games, you can do, hand-eye coordination, you can do a bunch of math games, but that, in my opinion, they're not very fun. The NeuroNation is heavily weighted towards language. And so, again, you will improve in writing and speaking and reading and, all of that. So I will look and see what else they had at the American Geriatric Society. But like I say, most of it because it comes from this clinical orientation, which is like finding out what's wrong as opposed to strengthening what's right. You know what I mean? So I can say, oh yeah, you could get a MoCA, that'll track things over time, but what it'll track is your decline.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments?
I had one more question because we've talked about it a couple of times. The article, did you say it was from Smithsonian?
I think so. Your Brain on Nature?
I was trying to find that. There's a book about that, and I was trying to find the one that I had read, which is called Nature Fix.
Yeah.
Because I've tried to explain this to people that, like, for me, if I don't have that outdoor time, my brain isn't functioning. Like, that's what I need. But I was trying to find that article, and so I'll see if I can find it, and we can send that out as well.
Okay. And I've quoted it a lot from the time that I read it in, I think it was 2016, but I may have the I may have the wrong magazine. It may have, I keep saying Smithsonian, but now that I'm saying it again, Melanie, did you look at National Geographic?
It might be National Geographic. I was doing that when I shut my camera off. I was kind of doing that in the background, and I realized I'm a total audiobook person, and I was realizing that you have the best voice. It's like a great, but you should read audio. You should read books. Like I would listen to you reading books.
You would? Okay. Thank you. That's a very kind thing to say. And I sometimes think, alongside my driving my bookmobile, that Melanie has been helping me with my retirement plans, and driving a bookmobile is one, but reading audiobooks is two.
It'd be really good.
Well, folks, it is 2 o'clock. This is really fun. There is something about, and I don't know, Mona and Anne and Susan, I think that you are the 3 participants that we have, in addition to those of us who are, Susan is with the grant. We didn't have a big turnout for this, and we didn't have a big turnout for book talk. And yet I have to say that both events were a lot of fun, and the kind of engagement that we had feels very positive to me and very natural and kind of exactly what we should be doing in this grant. So I want to ask Anne and Mona, you can do this verbally now or privately with Melanie later to give some feedback. Is this the kind of thing that we should do again? And if so, should we do it at a different time of day? Is there a way to get more people involved? Or is this just like, okay, I had fun just talking with you guys. This works for me, but how about some feedback?
This is Mona. I'm not sure. I think Melanie might be able to speak to this more directly because she has more experience with these programs, but I think time of day might be better. I'm more inclined to do something like this in the evening. And despite the fact that we are older, many of us are still working and so are not available this time of day. So that's just the only reason I could think of that it would, make a difference, maybe.
Yeah, okay. But worth doing, you think, Mona?
Oh, definitely. Yes, absolutely worth doing.
Okay. And Anne, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I missed your last talk because I'm working as well, so I think it's better in the evening.
Okay.
Early evening, like 6:30 or rather than in the middle of the day, because a lot of people, then it ties up their whole day.
Yes.
And people are busy. Those of us that, even though we're working in and out and doing things, you're still busy and there's things going on. So I would suggest that also. And I think it's very worthwhile. It's hard to get people. I belong to senior college, and I think people too are tired of being on Zoom.
Yeah.
They think the pandemic should be over and that's the end.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like we've been moving through COVID, and when we first started, we were like the only game in town, and so we had pretty good turnout. And then as things started to open up, we realized that there were fewer people attending live because by then they realized that they could often get the recording. And so that's one of the reasons that we do this, so that we make sure that we have a really solid recording and then we put it on YouTube. So I just checked our book talk live, and so far 114 people have watched us.
Oh, good.
I mean, it could just be that they pop in for 2 minutes or they listen to the whole thing. You never know. But I just checked the stats. And so for that particular talk, we had 165 people reached, 114 watched it for a few seconds. There's 21 reactions. So, so it's valuable one way or the other.
Yeah, good. Good. Well, we will put that in our report and keep promoting the forums. Well, thank you for being here, and thanks for your feedback, and definitely for the suggestions. I've certainly learned something, and I always do. So I'm just so grateful. And I want to also make a plug, or Melanie, maybe you could make a plug for Mary Lou's talk.
Mary Lou will be here on the 25th, which is the same day as the Still Alice talk. I don't know how many people are coming to Still Alice because we still have a bunch of books. So that's, maybe they've already read it. I'm hoping that we get at least a few people. But so Wednesday, May 25th at 1 p.m., we'll have Mary Lou Ciolfi. Did I say it right?
I think it's Ciolfi.
Ciolfi, who I've emailed back and forth with. And if you haven't had a chance, she's awesome. We're going to be discussing ageism. So I think it's a really interesting topic. So I'm looking forward to that one for sure. It's the same setup as this talk. And, again, I have to reiterate what Susan said. I'm really looking forward to the next couple of years as part of this programming.
Yeah.
Nice.
Excellent.
So
Well, thank you all again. Bring a friend next time, and we'll maybe see some of you at the book group, maybe some of you at Mary Lou's, and but if not, look for this space. We'll be back doing something in year 4.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you so much.
thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Ooh.